Elizabeth Stride, also known as Long Liz, among friends and colleagues, were born in Torslanda, Sweden, where she grew up. While in Sweden, Elizabeth was working as a servant girl for a Swedish family, but was caught and registered for prostitution in 1865. For several years, Elizabeth was in and out of hospitals for venereal diseases, but was after about a year granted permission to move to England. While living in London, Elizabeth joined the Swedish Church of East London and found a man named John Thomas Stride, whom she married. When she got married, she traded her maiden name Gustafsson for her husband's name Stride. The marriage didn't last and inevitably broke down in 1881. Elizabeth had kind of a fucked up life, and after her marriage was broken, she spent the 7 years before her death in a perpetual roller coaster of fucked up fuckery. Elizabeth's last evening alive had been spent cleaning rooms in the lodging house she had been staying in for the last 6 years, and was going out to do some work, if you know what I mean. Of course you know what I mean. Prostitutes were Jack the Ripper's primary type of victim. Anyway, she was seen leaving the lodging house at 7:30 p.m. and was again seen at 11 p.m. by two men who saw her sheltering in a doorway with a man 5 foot 5 inches tall. She was seen by several witnesses through the night, always in the company of a man. I would describe to you the description of this man, but it changes with every witness. But there is one witness who is a little bit more important. So let's skip the other ones and go straight for the gravy. Israel Schwartz was a Hungarian Jew, and he might have been the only person to actually have seen Jack the Ripper in the process of murdering someone. The man was a huge witness, and by huge I don't mean fat. I mean he was you know what I mean. And with the help of an interpreter, he was able to tell police what he saw. He said the man he saw was about 5 feet 5 inches tall, aged around 30, with dark hair, a fair complexion, a small brown mustache. He had a full face, broad shoulders, and appeared to be slightly intoxicated. As Schwartz watched, the man tried to pull the woman into the street, but then spun her around and threw her onto the footway. The woman screamed 3 times, but not very loudly. Israel Schwartz believed that he was witnessing a domestic assault, and so he crossed the road to avoid getting involved. When he did, he saw a second man standing, lighting up his pipe. As Schwartz passed him, the man who was attacking the woman called out, apparently to this second man, the word Lipski, at which point the second man began to follow him. Lipski basically meant Jew. Schwartz panicked and began to run, and had managed to lose his pursuer by the time he reached the nearby railway arc. This second man, Schwartz said, was about 35 years old, around 5 feet 11 inches tall, had a fresh complexion, light brown hair, a brown mustache, and wore a dark overcoat with an old black hard felt hat. Going by this witness account, her death is estimated to have occurred between 12:45 a.m. and 1 a.m., as 1 a.m. is when her body was spotted. The second man seen by Israel would later be eliminated as a suspect and accomplice by police. How he was eliminated is unknown. At around 1 a.m., a man named Louis D.M. Schutz was returning from a day of hawking cheap jewelry, but as he turned into a yard, his pony promptly stopped and refused to go any further. Louis could barely see anything in the darkness, but from what he could see, he could make out a dark shape laying on the ground close to the wall to the clubhouse he was going to. He went up and prodded the dark form, and he then attempted to lift it. However, that didn't work, so he got a match to shed some light on the situation. The wind was howling, so the match was extinguished almost immediately, but in the brief flash of light, he could see a woman lying on the ground. He thought she was dead, but he wasn't sure. Then he was gripped by panic, as he knew his wife had been in the club on the other side of the wall, and he ran inside thinking it could have been her laying there on the street. But he found his wife inside and called the other patrons over to help him see what was going on outside. Now that they could use more light and see the scene clearer, they noticed that not only was the woman dead as a doornail, there was a massive amount of blood guzzling from her throat, running down the cobblestone. Several of the onlookers ran off to fetch a police officer, shouting police and murder into the night. Eventually they found a cop curious as to what all the fuss was about. His name was Edward Spooner, and he loved spooning. When Mr. Spooner arrived at the scene, 15 people had gathered around the corpse. Mr. Spooner investigated the body and felt she was still warm. He also noticed what he referred to as a great gash around her throat. Her throat had been split and a 2-inch wide wound was left. Elizabeth's blood had now been making its way to the door of the club. More police arrived, and the crowd of morbidly curious people grew further. As people arrived and investigated the scene, they noted that she had been laid down softly. However, they did not know if her throat was slit before or after she was laid down. Her attempts to call out for help had been clenched, as Jack had slashed right through her windpipe with his knife, which in turn would have caused her to bleed out in about a minute and a half. Police looked and looked but found no clues. Eventually, Elizabeth's body was moved away and her blood was washed off the street. Elizabeth's body had been removed at about 4:30 a.m. and 3 hours before that, Jack had already struck again. This is why the night of September 30th is called the double event. He struck twice in one night, and his second murder was a lot more gruesome than his first. At about the same time Elizabeth Stride's body was discovered, Catherine Eddowes was being led out of a police station in another district of London. She had been put there the evening before because she had been so intoxicated she had started entertaining people on the cobblestone imitating a fire engine and then laying down on that same cobblestone to sleep. Police officers questioned her, but she refused to say her name. Later, an officer on duty in the station heard soft singing coming from her cell, and when he went to talk to her, she asked to be released. He asked her name and she said it was Mary Ann Kelly, which I find kind of strange considering that a woman named Mary Kelly would be murdered by Jack the Ripper just 5 weeks later. As Catherine left the station, she chirped at the officer, "Good night, old cock." Catherine was now making her way towards Mitre Square. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but you're gonna have to live with that. A square drenched in darkness, just like the rest of London seemed to be. It was also surrounded by buildings which didn't help women walking alone when the Ripper was loose. At 1:30 a.m. a cop patrolling the streets passed by the square, and at that point he was confident no one was there. Only 15 minutes before Catherine died, 3 men passed by her and a man. One of the men was bothered and had some sort of object shoved up his asshole, so he made a comment about how he felt unsafe with all these weird people around or something like that. However, one of the men wasn't as bothered and looked at the couple directly. He managed to see the man's face, and considering it was shortly before her death, he probably saw Jack the Ripper's face. This is what he saw. He had the appearance of a sailor and was aged about 30. He was around 5 feet 9 inches tall, of medium build. He had a fair complexion and a small fair mustache. He sported a reddish neckerchief tied in a knot, wore a pepper and salt colored loose-fitting jacket, and had on a grey peaked cloth cap. However, it should be noted that the guy only obtained a quick glimpse of the Jack the Ripper suspect, and he maintained later that he would not be able to recognize or identify him if he saw him again. The cop that was on his patrol looked through the square again, but this time he found something he probably didn't expect. He found Catherine Eddowes' horribly mutilated corpse. The body was laying on its back and the head was turned to the left shoulder. The arms were by the side of the body, both palms pointed upwards. The fingers were slightly bent, the clothes were pulled up above the waist, the thighs were exposed. The left leg was extended in a line with the body. Her face had been greatly disfigured. Her throat was cut. The intestines were drawn out to a large extent and placed over the right shoulder. He had pulled her intestines out and laid them over her shoulder, and they were smeared over with some feces. A piece of intestines about 2 feet long was detached from the body and placed between the body and the left arm. It was made by design. A big piece of the right ear was cut off. There was a quantity of clotted blood on the pavement on the left side of the neck, around the shoulder and upper part of the arm, and fluid blood which had flowed under the neck to the right shoulder because the pavement was sloped in that direction. The body was still warm. Rigor mortis had not set in. She had died within the half hour. Several buttons were found in the clotted blood after the body was removed. Do you remember the last episode when I talked about the vigilante group hunting the Ripper on the streets? Yeah, well, it seems like Jack wanted to do some wholesome YouTube pranks on the president of the vigilante committee. So he sent him a letter addressed as From Hell. However, he also sent a very smelly piece of a human kidney. The committee president was used to attention from unsavory characters, as several strange people had inquired about him, and he had received 2 letters addressed from Jack the Ripper before. I'm gonna read all three of the letters. The From Hell letter last. And the From Hell letter, Jack the Ripper, he on purpose misspelled a bunch of things. I'm gonna read them as properly as I can. I'm not gonna read them as they're written because then it won't make any sense. So, but first I'm gonna read the first one he received on October 10. Now, I write you a letter in black ink, as I have no more of the right stuff. I think you are all asleep in Scotland Yard with your bloodhounds, as I will show you tomorrow night. I am going to do a double event, but not in Whitechapel. Got rather too warm there. Had to shift. No more till you hear me again. Jack the Ripper. He then got a postcard in the mail that read the following. Say boss, you seem rare frightened. I guess I'd like to give you fits, but can't stop time enough to let your box of toys play copper games with me. But hope to see you when I don't hurry much. Bye bye, boss. And to top part 2 off, I'm going to finish with the infamous From Hell letter, the one that was sent with a piece of human kidney. And remember what I said earlier. From Hell, Mr. Lusk. I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you. The other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a while longer. Signed, Catch Me When You Can, Mr. Lusk. Thank you for watching, and good night. Okay, I can read it one more time, but as it's written, if you want to hear that. Okay. From hell, Mr. Lusk. Sore. I send you half the kidney I took from one woman. Preserved it for you t'other. Piece I fried and ate, it was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a wee longer. Signed, Catch Me When You Can, Mr. Lusk. I didn't know Jack the Ripper was Indian.